Guys, I can't believe the guest we have today. He is the writer for Phoenix Resurrection, Uncanny X-Men, Astonishing X-Men, among many other titles. We have Matt Rosenberg.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, Matt, you brought back my favorite character after a 14-year siesta. Was she dead for 14 or was it 16?
14, I want to say.
I'm pretty sure it's 14.
It feels like 14. Someone will definitely let us know if we're wrong.
That's right, guys. DM us if it's not 14. But it's so funny because the last time we really saw Jean was in Phoenix Endsong, and then you brought her back in Phoenix Resurrection, and thank you. It just made my day. It made my life. It made my 2018.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, it's definitely a high point of my career for me to have written that book. Jean has been one of my favorite characters since I was a little kid, very, very little. And so when I got the call about doing that, it was like one of those, like, need to sit down, need to catch my breath and get my bearings kind of things. So yeah, I'm glad that people seem to really dig it and it resonated with people. So that was a nice feeling.
Well, 75% of this conversation is going to deal with Jean Grey and Phoenix Resurrection. But
all right,
before we get into that, because the second you said that when I got that call, I was like, I want to know everything. But I want to get to know you a little bit better. And I'm curious, when we were talking before we hit record, you said you grew up here in New York?
Yeah. I grew up in Manhattan, born and raised. Both my parents were writers. So I grew up in the, not very mean streets of Manhattan, but it's a different Manhattan than it is now. And I actually grew up like one block from a comic shop. So that was very much like as formulative as a place can be for a person was like the first place I was allowed to go on my own because my mom could watch me go out the street and walk across the street from her window was the comic book store. So I have I talk to a lot of people who have the like comic experience and the growing up experience of like going to 7-Eleven or going wherever to get their comics. And I was like, oh no, I never did that. I was just a comic book store kid, but that's a New York experience, I guess.
Wait, which comic book store did you grow up by?
I grew up by Big Apple Comics. It's not there anymore. It was on the 90s in Broadway. It did not survive the 1990s, but it was a lot of stores closed, but it was a great shop.
My mind immediately went to Big Apple Con.
Oh yeah. I believe it's some of the same people.
So? Okay.
But I don't actually know that. I've always thought that, but I actually don't know that that's true.
I mean, I don't know either way. I used to work at Wizard, and it took me like a hot minute to realize Wizard World Conventions and it's the same brand. So, or Toy Wiz as well. Yeah. I keep forgetting about Toy Wiz. I just interviewed one of the sellers there, and he's here like, yeah, we have ties obviously to Wizard. I was like, really? As if I had never heard that before. Yeah. So what was your earliest memory of the X-Men?
I mean, for me, the X-Men is really it's what I learned to read on. I have an older brother and he was reading X-Men comics and going and buying old, a lot of the Claremont stuff and Claremont and Byrne and that kind of stuff. He was buying those and, he would say like, don't touch my comics. And then he would go out and I would sneak into his room and read all his books. So for me, like a good older brother would. Yeah, for sure. For me, like the death of Jean Grey is like one of the first things I remember reading, of anything on my own. And like X-Men books were the first thing I was buying with my own money. I've always been an X-Men fan. I would save up as much as I could and I would go and I'd buy as many issues of X-Men as I could and like try and piece together what was happening. And you'd be buying, which is like random issues. Cause I'd be like, well, I have $3 left and I can get this one. And then I'd go home and read it. And it's the middle of, the Outback saga. And it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, why is Wolverine nailed to a cross? And who's this girl with the fireworks and all this stuff? And then you'd have to like set your sights on like I need to read the issue before this, and so that would be like 2 weeks later I could go back and get that. So that was it for me. It's like both learning to read and like collecting comics all comes from the X-Men for me.
Well, it's so funny that you said that because I was talking to Zeb Wells a couple months ago, and people who tune into the podcast regularly know I repeat this so much, but I think it was so true. And you just echoed it, which is when you grew up, in the 80s, 90s, and you were going to your comic book store, it wasn't like how you have it today, where you can go on like Wikipedia and like get a list of all the issues that are coming out, all the characters. Like you go to the comic book store with your allowance. You pray to White Phoenix that they have the issues you wanted. And most of the times you're coming in and you're getting an issue that's midway through a story. They don't have back issues or anything. And so you just go home and you're lost. And you almost become this little archaeologist throughout the years where you have to you have to actually seek this information on this character. And it made it very precious back in the day.
For sure. I mean, for me, like they used to have the Marvel handbooks that were like pages that you'd put in a binder. And that to me was like everything, because they would fill in all this stuff where I'd be like, how does this person know this person? And you'd be like, wait, why does like, where did Beast and Angel go? And it's like, oh, they joined the Defenders, and they were, it was always like, it's like a puzzle. It was much more like a puzzle. There was much more of a hunt and collecting element to it, of trying to put it all together, which I really appreciated as a kid. But it is interesting now when I make books, like trying to, it's a common conversation, especially I used to have at Marvel a lot, where they say that, like Stan Lee always used to say, write a comic, like write every comic like it's someone's first. Which I think is good advice, but it's also like, it's not really how it works now for most people. Like you have Comixology, you have trade paperbacks, you have back issue collections, you have Wikipedia. You don't have to introduce who Daredevil is every 20 pages of Daredevil. Like people will know who he is in the comic. It's very rare that someone will just be totally caught off guard by everything. So it creates a different sort of comic reading experience than I think I had as a kid, and a lot of my generation did, for sure.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I remember reading certain issues and they'd be like, here comes Emma Frost, a diamond skinned telepath who is, now with Cyclops or whatever. Yeah. And that didn't switch until recently, because I remember even towards the end of AVX, they build that as a jumping on point for new readers, when you would think that'd be more of a combination of stories. But it's, again, that mentality of that, like, any issue could be someone's first, because at the time you just didn't have the trade paperbacks the way you have them now, or Comixology, as you said. So I agree. Is there a specific X-Man that resonated with you very early on?
Yeah, my two favorites as a kid, and I only really sort of looked this in the eye when I got to writing the X-Men, but I had two favorite X-Men, and they've been my favorites my whole life. And it's Havoc and Magic are my two favorite characters. Probably my two favorite characters in all of comics. And I definitely, when you start working on the books, you really like analyze things and relationships in these characters and your relationship to the characters. And I had this very intense moment where I realized that, like, as a little kid, as a little brother, reading and identifying with Havoc and Magic, who are both the, like, sort of outcast, underdog, younger siblings of more successful X-Men, and arguably more powerful than their older siblings. I was like, oh man, this is so embarrassing that's like who I identified with. But I love them so much, and I think they're both such like rich, interesting characters that they've just stuck with me the whole time. Like those are my two go-tos for sure. So,
I mean, Astonishing X-Men with Havoc, you must have had a field day.
Oh yeah,
when you were able to write that book.
Yeah, I mean, they offered me Astonishing, and Charles Soule had been writing it, and I was like, am I continuing what Charles is doing? They were like, no, he's done with his story. Like, you can just go do whatever you want, new team. And the first thing I asked is, I was like, can I get Havoc? And they were like, yeah. Like, I think they were caught off guard. I think they're used to a lot of people being like, can I get Wolverine? Can I get Storm? Like a lot of A-listers that people ask for. And I tend to be the opposite. I tend to ask for a lot of the not A-listers. And so they were like, yeah, for sure. And that was that, I was so happy to get to write Havoc in that, and then that carried over to Uncanny. And I got to write Magic in New Mutants, and that carried over to Uncanny also. So
well, you had, I mean, Havoc in particular had a big moment in your Uncanny run. What was it like writing him hit dead, him dying?
yeah. It was, I mean, it was really hard. That was a hard book to write. It was a hard book to do in a lot of ways. It was very much, I mean, I knew the assignment when I took it that I had to get rid of them. And I knew that, it wasn't that, but it was sort of a, like, this is, get the X-Men to their darkest moment was sort of the idea that, like, we were the darkness before the dawn of X, as it's now known. So it was kind of a really difficult assignment, just because I was like, well, I get to write a lot of my favorites, and I get to wrap a lot of things, and there were a lot of storylines that I was doing in other books that were supposed to keep going, and then they moved to Uncanny, and they were like, you can continue them in Uncanny. But so there was a lot of, like, loose ends in a bunch of my books. Like New Mutants had some loose ends to it, and Astonishing has some loose ends at the end of it. And so getting to wrap those up was really good. But I also knew that anyone I put in the book was, even when I was outlining who it would be, I was like, anyone who goes in this book is, like, in very serious danger, and I have to, come to terms with that. So but that's the job a lot of the time.
I love the idea that you probably got a call and they're like, hey, and we'll get to Uncanny, but, like, so you're gonna kill everyone, and you're gonna create the X-Men's worst nightmare right now.
Yeah. It was I think they knew Jordan White, and who's the head of the X Office, and CB, who's editor in chief of Marvel. They knew that, like, of the Marvel writers, like, of the current pool, I was definitely one of the most sort of knowledgeable and passionate about the X-Men. Like, I'm always the one in summits who'd be like, actually, that's so and so's kid. Like, just be really annoying about it. And so they knew that they sort of gave me the assignment of doing, like, it's the end of this era, like, look back, but also, like, figure out ways to look back on the era, but also end it. And so it was an interesting assignment, just because it was dark and it's sad and difficult, but it was also, sort of an honor to do, because they were, like, really trusting me to sort of know my history and be able to sort of end a period of X-Men.
Yeah. So. It was a very dark and bleak time for the mutants, and I think you captured it. You and LaRocca captured it so well. You felt that despair in every panel. And I'm curious, though, because you are a very talented writer, what came first? Was it your love for comic books and you wanted to be a writer, or your love for writing and you wanted to write comics? Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense.
Sorry.
I think I'm weird in this. I found that among my peers, I have a very opposite answer. Most of the comic writers I know wanted to make comics and, figured out how to write for that. And I'm very much the opposite. I loved comics my whole life. I've read comics since I was a little kid. I read comics every day of my life and have almost my whole life. And but I never wanted to be a writer. I didn't really particularly want to make comics. It just didn't dawn on me. Both of my parents were writers, so I just knew early on, I was like, that's something I don't want to do. Like, they work long hours and it's stressful and intense, and I just don't want that to be my life. And so I never pursued it. I never tried to do it. And I worked in other jobs. I worked in the music industry a lot. And
really? Where in the music industry?
I did pretty much everything you can do in the music industry that doesn't require having musical ability. So, I managed bands, and I toured with bands, and I booked shows, and I booked tours, and I ran a record label for a long time.
Oh man, that's awesome. My husband works at Live Nation Ticketmaster.
Oh yeah. I have some very good friends who work at Live Nation.
Oh, we'll talk about that offline.
One of whom I named a character in my X-Men run after, and he reminds me of that all the time. And he's a good old friend. He used to book shows on Long Island, and now he runs a bunch of Live Nation venues and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Probably works with my husband, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I spent a long time not doing comics, and then I just hit a point in music where I was like really kind of burnt out on it, and I was like, if I keep doing this, I'm going to grow to hate it, and I don't want to do that. Music is so important to me. And I was like, I need to find something else that I love as much as music that I can sort of dive into. And the only kind of thing besides music that I loved as much as comics. So I was just like, I guess I'm going to try and figure out how you make comics and how you write comics. And so that's how I ended up here.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. And did your parents give you any advice when you sat down and started writing comics?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. My dad actually,
And I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Like, what kind of writers are your parents?
My dad was he wrote 9 novels. He wrote a lot of TV, like police procedural kind of stuff.
All right, good dad.
And he's the most prolific TV movie writer in history. He's written more TV movies than anyone. But if you asked him what he did, he would say a novelist. And my mom only ever wrote one thing that got made. She wrote a slasher film.
Stop. What was the name?
It's called Maniac.
Okay.
It's a 1980 very terrible slasher film. But yeah, when I started, I said to them like, oh, I think I want to write. And they were very excited. And then I said, I think I want to write comics. And they were very sad. And they just were not, and they were very supportive. My parents have always been very supportive. And they were like, we have agents, we have managers, like we can get you meetings with literary agents or TV film people. And I was like, no, I want to write comics. And they just were very sad. And I actually gave my parents a stack of comics to read and was like, read these and, afterwards talk to me. And if you don't appreciate why I love the medium of comics, like we can go back and have a discussion, but like you have to understand what I'm trying to make first and why I love it before we have this conversation. And they did. And, they read all the books and took me out to dinner and were like, okay, what can we do to help you? And then after that, they were always just as supportive as parents can be, which is really,
oh my
nice.
God, that's so wonderful. So what was that first, how did you land at Marvel then?
Yeah, so I was doing indie stuff. I did a lot of stuff at a company called Black Mask, who are an indie publisher, and I actually put out the first book there. But I did a book called We Can Never Go Home, which some Marvel editors read and offered me some work. I was 3 issues into it when I got a call about that, and I did a book at Black Mask called We Can Never Go Home and a book called Four Kids Walk No Bank, which people at Marvel really dug. And so they just kept sort of pinging me. And Black Mask is awesome. Black Mask is a place that like, I work there too. I worked there for a while. When I started, I was doing sort of marketing and publicity for them and, helping scout talent a little bit. I was just very close with the people who run it and would say like, oh, these are cool people. But a lot of awesome creators got their start there. Teenie Howard's first creator-owned book is at Black Mask. Vita Ayala's first creator-owned book is at Black Mask. Mags Visaggio's first creator-owned book is at Black Mask. Like it's a really long list of like really good, if you look at the new generation of comics writers and artists, like a really high percentage of them, like their first work is at Black Mask, and it's really a great nurturing pool for talent. But the I did this book called We Can Never Go Home, and an editor named Jake Thomas emailed me, and he was like, hey, we're doing this event called Secret Wars. Would you want to do something in it? You can do whatever you want. And I was like, yeah, I want to do an X-Men story. And he was like, okay, it's going to be set in, New Egyptia, which is, a weird alternate world that Khonshu rules, that's based from a 2-issue arc of New Warriors in the 90s. And I was like, cool, it's going to be an X-Men story. Like, you're telling me about New Warriors and Moon Knight, but we're going to do an X-Men story. And that was it. And that was my first thing. I did a 10-page X-Men story about the X-Men as slaves in this new Egypt, and them leading a slave revolt. So.
And then how did that come to Phoenix Resurrection? How did you go from there? And that would have been 2 years later, right?
Yeah, that's about 2 years later. So I did that Secret Wars journal, and I didn't hear from them for a bit, maybe a couple months, and then I got asked to do a Quake one shot.
I remember that.
Yeah, I got called in, and it was me and my buddy Patrick Kinlan co-writing, and Daniel Warren Johnson on art. And they called me in and were like, yeah, do you want to do something for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? And I'd never seen the show. The show had just started, and they were like, or had been out for a little bit, but they were like, do you want to do something for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, we're doing single issues for each character. Who would you want to do? And I was like, Nick Fury. And they were like, that's taken. And I was like, Mockingbird? And they were like, that's taken. And I'm just like trying to go through S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and they finally were like, why don't we tell you who we're looking for? And I was like, okay. And they listed a bunch of characters from the show who I didn't know who they were. And then they were like, in Quake. And I was like, oh, Quake, I love Quake. Like, I think Quake's a great character. And so I did that, and they were pretty pleased with it, and they invited me back to do a Kingpin book. And I did this Kingpin series that they loved, that Axel Alonso, who was the editor-in-chief, like really loved. And he called me into the office, and he was like, okay, I think you have a bright future here. Like, you're really doing well. Like, what is the thing you'd want to do most? And I was like, X-Men. And he was like, okay. And he's like, X-Men is tough. He was like, X-Men is a tough book to write. And,
yeah.
And I was like, yeah. I was like, I know. I was like, these are my people. I'm a lifelong fan. Like, I get it. I know the history. I'm not like someone who just thinks they're neat. Like, I know my history really well. And he was like, okay. He's like, I'll think on it. And then, maybe 2 weeks later, he called me, and he was like, okay, here's the deal. We're bringing back Jean Grey. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, more than anything. And he's like, okay, you got a week, and in a week you're coming into the office and tell us what your plan is. And so I had 7 days to come in and pitch them on Phoenix Resurrection.
Wow. So first of all, it wasn't just anyone who called you. It was Axel Alonso who called you to tell you that you were going to bring back Jean Grey. So you hang up the phone with him, and you're like, I'm sorry, I said hang up. As if you hung up the phone. What were your next steps? Like, especially given where Jean was at, because for years they were teasing her return. She may or may not be Hope. We saw her in the White Hot Room. So she has so much going on there. What was the first step when you sat down to write her return?
I went.
And thank you for doing that. Thank you.
The first thing I did, I went and read the Death of Jean stuff, and Phoenix War Song and Phoenix End Song. I got both of those out and reread those like first night. Was just like, okay, I'm just going to read this whole night and like think on it. And then I was just a lot of like looking up some of my favorite Jean stuff, seeing, where it landed, what I think, and what I wanted to do. And, I was sort of struck by this idea that Jean is this character that I loved growing up, and I do love, and I just felt like in recent times she had become synonymous with the Phoenix Force, and the Phoenix Force has just overshadowed her as a character in a lot of stories. And I get it, it's like a god level power entity, but I just a lot of the things I love about Jean I wasn't seeing in some of the books that were like more Phoenix centric books. And so I made the very questionable decision to go in and be like, you're bringing Jean back. I want to do a Phoenix story, but I want to do it that it's a breakup story. I want to do the Phoenix and Jean separating, and I want to leave Jean without the Phoenix.
So that was your call. I thought that would have been a mandate from editorial, given exactly what you just said about like the Phoenix being this godlike entity. It creates more of a plot problem.
No, they were not entirely sold on it when I pitched it.
Interesting.
Because the thing I pitched was very character driven, and I said, the thing I really said is like, look, this is, to put it in sort of coarse terms, it's an abusive relationship. It's a codependent abusive relationship. Like the Phoenix is in love and obsessed with her, but it can't stop killing her, and she needs it and is sort of dependent on it and doesn't realize that she doesn't actually need it. She doesn't realize that like she was one of the world's greatest heroes without it before it, and she turned to it in a moment of desperation and has never been able to split from it. And I was like, it's a very toxic relationship, and she's attached to this very dangerous thing that is overshadowing her and taking away her personality. And like I was like, I want to do the breakup story. And I remember pitching that, and I pitched it to, I think, the whole senior editorial. All the senior editors were there, and there was a lot of very concerned looks, understandably. And I remember one of the editors was like, "What is the role of the X-Men in this story?" And I was like, "Well, they're her family. Their role is to support her and be strong for her, but this is something she's going to have to do on her own. It's a Jean story." I was like, if you want to call the book X-Men Resurrection, like that's a different conversation. You asked me for the resurrection of Jean Grey, it's going to be her story. They're support characters to support her. And I think, I think I sold them in the room on it, and Axel was very excited about it, and Mark Paniccia, who was the X-Men editor at the time, was very excited about it and very supportive. And so it was a pretty tough sale, but I think they got it as like, if you want this character back, you need to establish that she is her own character and worth bringing back, because the Phoenix Force comes back all the time, and this is a different thing. So it was it was really exciting, and it was it was my first time sitting in with all these editors in the Marvel office in one of the conference rooms. Like, I'd never done that before.
That must have been so nerve-wracking, talking about a very iconic character who's been dead, and you have to go in and pitch it. And they're giving you a little bit of pushback there.
Yeah. I mean, that's their job, is to do that. And I knew that, and they're great at nurturing creativity and sort of pushing you to do the best book possible. But yeah, it was really terrifying. It was really, oh my God. It was intense.
Well, you know what? I loved the approach to Phoenix Resurrection, because I feel like Phoenix Ensom was a very Jean-centric story. I think Here Comes Tomorrow was a very Jean-centric story, and sort of her, her new X-Men stuff. So I'm curious, did they have an original vision? Because was it your call to make it a weekly event?
No, that was them.
I'm sure that was a fun editorial schedule for you. That was
what's funny. They did have a vision when I came in that they only told me after, and they were like, "We thought this was going to be a cosmic war thing." They were like, "We were very sure you were going to do a like X-Men take on, the Shi'ar, the Kree, like
And Jean just somehow comes back.
And Jean is I think what they thought is that Jean is back and everybody comes to kill her, and the X-Men appear. And I was like, yeah, that's not about Jean though. Like, that's not a book about Jean. That's a book about the X-Men. That's a book about the Phoenix Force. Like, that's a book about a lot of things. And I was like, and you guys already sort of did that in Death of Greys, and like that's a great arc. That's Claremont.
The Trial of Jean Grey as well.
Trial of Jean Grey for sure. And I was just like, I was like, that seems done to me. I don't know. I spent the whole time thinking like I'm gonna get fired at any day, but I was really confident in my pitch. So like I was like, well, if I get fired, I get fired for the right reasons, because I was doing the book that I believed in, that I felt like was important to the character.
You wrote that book with so much heart, and now I'm understanding when you said that Dark Phoenix for Death was one of the first comics you read. When Jean is in that bed and she's reciting her final words on the moon in the background, it just, as a Jean stan, you felt that weight there. Or even when she's in the Annie's diner and she's like doing the space shuttle flight, and then the end where the Phoenix is like taking her through like the different stages of her life. I get now from your perspective that quest for identity for Jean and establishing who she is and why she ends in the Marvel Girl outfit, which is pre-Phoenix. I mean, it's now Hickman, but when you wrote it was pre-Phoenix.
It was I wanted to make sure that she we went through, and I didn't want to do one of those things where we erase things. Like, I think they were also looking to be like, can we clean things up? And I was like, the mess is part of it. Like, the mess we love. Like, I don't want to clean anything. I don't want to retcon anything. I don't want to remove anything. I want to acknowledge all, and then tell her, you get to pick. Like, you get to pick where you were happiest and at your best, and like give her the power to once again take control of her destiny, which she hasn't had control of in decades. And I was like, let's do that. Let's empower her to do that. And so they, I think that got to them, and they really, they really backed the book really hard. And I was really lucky.
Well, I feel like everyone was reading the book when it came out. Was it January 2018? December 20. Yeah, something like that. I feel like everyone was reading it. I remember I used to work at HarperCollins. Actually, Charles Soule was one of my writers. And I would go across the street. It was in the financial district. And I was like, Phoenix Resurrection 1. And the guy's like, oh, you and everyone else. So it was a wonderful memory I had. So Jean was dead for 14 years. Why did you know why Marvel wanted to bring her back then all of a sudden?
No, I never.
It was about time.
It was time, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. There's all sorts of like Machiavellian, like, oh, they didn't want the X-Men to be prominent here. They were trying to build up other things here and all that. And I just, all that stuff's above my pay grade, and I never knew it. And like, I'd hear all these rumors of like, they're doing this because of this. And I'd be like in the office, and I'd be like, that's definitely not true. They're definitely not doing that. But no, if there's a reason other than like, it's just time, I was never told it. They were just like, it's time for Jean to come back. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
Let's go. Let's do it, girl. Did you have any unused resurrection ideas that just didn't make it or just got vetoed?
Yeah, there was a whole thing. There are actually unused pages that we pulled out of the book. Basically when the book was wrapping, they were like, you're gonna do an X-Men book after this, like this is gonna lead into a book. And like they were doing Blue and Gold at the time, and they were like, we want you to do Red. And I was like, what is Red? And they were like, it's Jean's team. And I wrote it to be not very, and I was like, Jean is back, but she's not in a position to lead a team. Like, she's back to figuring out who she is. Like, she's not going to walk into the mansion and be like, hey, like, you four, follow me. Like, let's go save the world. Like, that's just, I was like, that doesn't feel emotionally like where I'm at or anything. And
it's like, Jean, hi, there are things called cell phones now or iPhones now. Like, welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Just to be like, yeah, she just wants to take a couple months to like see some movies and like,
Netflix is a thing.
Just like sleep on the couch and hang out and catch up with people. So like, I was like, I don't feel great about that. And I'd written this end that was sort of a little dark. That was her in the mansion, and it's drawn. The art exists, which is very rare for Marvel. Usually if something's drawn, it's out. Like they don't pay for a lot of art that doesn't end up on the page. So we had this 4-page sort of stinger at the end that was Jean at the mansion and the X-Men being like kind of worried about her, and she's in her room and like she's in her room with the bird cage, and like sort of they're unclear like how she's doing and how like they don't trust her, really, is what it is, that they're like kind of nervous around her because she's not happy and she's not upbeat. And like Wolverine sort of steps in and is like, is it Wolverine? I feel like it's Wolverine. Maybe it's not Wolverine. No, I think it is Wolverine.
It would have been
it's Old Man Logan. Yeah, it's Old Man Logan. Because I was like, that doesn't make sense, but it's Old Man Logan steps in and is like, you just need to let her be. Like she just needs time. And that was the end. And then they were like, after I wrote that, they were like, you're gonna do an X-Men team book. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And I turned it down, which they were very confused by. And it's a great thing I did because my good buddy Tom Taylor did it and knocked out of the park with that book, and it's a great book. Oh,
we love X-Men Red.
X-Men Red's great. I love Tom. He's a really good buddy. And he did a much better book than I would have done if I'd been given the reins. And when I talked to Tom and heard what he was doing, I was like, oh, the end of my book doesn't fit with that. And he was like, well, let's try and make them fit. And I was like, no, it's not on you to try and like you have a great pitch, and like it's not on you to try and rework to the end of mine. Like, let me get out of your way on this. Like, I brought her back to bring her back. Like, let me just. And so we cut the last 4 pages of the book, which was a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails to sort of be like, please let me do this. Like, I just don't think. So yeah, there's unused stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff like in the outline and pitch that didn't. We ended up giving more space to the X-Men than I originally intended, and trying to think if there's other stuff. There's probably other stuff in there that didn't end up, but that's the ending is the big thing that, like, more than almost any other Marvel book I've ever done. Like, yeah, there's a whole bit of an issue that isn't.
What? Please release that for us crazy Gene stands.
I don't think I'm allowed. It's not lettered.
Oh,
I think it's colored.
Oh, interesting.
It is colored. Yeah, I have it somewhere in color.
You're like, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
It's not mine to release, it's Marvel's.
Yeah.
They said at one point, like, would you mind if we did a big hardcover of this, of putting it out? And I was like, no, I guess that's fine. I was like, I'd like to maybe have a letter explaining it. And they were like, yeah. But then we didn't do hardcover stuff.
I was going to say, I don't think there was a Phoenix Resurrection hardcover. I have the trade paperback. But I don't remember it.
2 versions of the trade paperback, but no hardcover.
What does the black and red costume mean? Which everyone loved. I mean, you saw the cosplayers come out with that. So many. You saw that.
I wanted it to be the black and red costume was, we had the white costume, the White Phoenix, and the White Phoenix was sort of an ascension away from everything. Mm-hmm. The black and red was the opposite. It was they are bonded forever. Like, the black and red was the marriage of Jean and the Phoenix in a way that was inseparable, that they would become one entity. And the idea was that if she went in that costume and was in that costume the whole time, she was gone. Like, the Jean was gone forever. Like, gotcha. was sort of the pitch I had on it, was just like, this is her embracing the Phoenix in a way that she knows what it is now, and embracing it is a darker thing. Like, in the past, you can always be like, well, she's embraced it, but she doesn't fully understand it. And now when the black and red costume comes in, it's like the final version where she would embrace it and it would be inseparable. And so I was like, I just want to get to that one last hurdle of, like, there's a finality to where they would be going. And she starts to go there, and just at the last second pulls back, and they pull her out of it. So
that was such a beautiful scene. I remember when Axel Alonso was like, I just read issue 5 of Phoenix Resurrection and I was crying. And when she comes out in that black and red costume, and then like the Phoenix kind of goes out and she has a moment and Scott comes in and she's like, oh my God, Scott, you died. I wasn't here to protect you. I mean, you just wrote Jean the way she is, which is she's a protector. She's the heart of the X-Men. And she would come to Cyclops and he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I know, you know what I mean? Like, cause Jean has that understanding, which was the same understanding we saw at the end of Here Comes Tomorrow, where she was here, like, in order for the universe to be right, I have to push Scott to be with Emma. Like, Jean just has that understanding, that above understanding, and I think you captured it so well. I'm sorry, pointing at you when I said that. I was like, you understand it. You understand it.
Yeah, I mean, she's
like, I know I wrote the issues.
She's really, like, at her best, she's she's selfless in a way that even the other X-Men aren't. She's someone who really understands and is really empathetic. And so for her to, like, be in the black and red costume and then see these things that are like mistakes that have happened and things that have been allowed to happen because of her, she's really that's where you get to her. That's where it really comes together for her, that's where the Jean overpowers the Phoenix in it all.
Well, it was such a wonderful story. You brought Jean back. I mean, on behalf of all crazy Jean stands everywhere, thank you for that, Matthew Rosenberg. The other part of the interview I wanted to talk to you about was your Uncanny run. You brought Uncanny back for volume 5, I believe. And I've spoken with, like, Jordan D. White, and he was telling me how, like, the initial pitch for Hoxpox was supposed to be just like a one and done, like, mini series, but it evolved into obviously something bigger. So when you're going into Uncanny, did you know the Hickman pitch was coming, or the Hickman saga was coming?
Oh yeah. By the time we came in, so Uncanny started, and it was me and Kelly Thompson and Ed Brisson. And
Great team, by the way. That first issue. Oh my
oh, thank
God.
you. And we're all very close. Me and Kelly and Ed we're really good friends. Are really good friends, and um, they flew in Kelly and Ed to talk about the book, and we went through it. And at the time, they were like, "Just so you understand, like John is coming in. He has these plans," and we were like, and we knew that, but we were like, "What are they?" And they were like, "You need to talk to him." And so we're like, "Okay." And so then actually we came back, I want to say like a month later, and John came in and he walked us all through it. He walked us through 3 years, 3 year plan. That
Wow.
was, yeah. And it's great. It's brilliant. And I love it. I loved it. And that sort of, but we were only on the book for 10 issues in theory. Like we were on those 10, and then that's why it was disassembled, because that was gonna be the collapse of the X-Men, and then House of X, and then Hawks and Pox would start. And then John's team, they wanted more time, and the Marvel editorial wanted it to be darker, to go more catastrophic than Hawks and Pox. And so we were maybe 2 issues in to our run when they were like, "You need to shift what you're doing." And they were like, "Do we want to extend this?" I was actually going to be taking X-Force. X-Force was the book that I was taking after Uncanny, the 10 issues of Uncanny. And they called me and they were like, "Hey, we're taking X-Force from you." And I had an outline and I really loved it. And I was like really bummed to lose X-Force and was really sad. And they were like, "But we're giving you something else." And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "We're giving you Uncanny." And
Okay.
I was like, "Oh, okay." They're like, "You start with 11." And I was like, "What is it?" And they were like, "It's Cyclops and Wolverine. That's all we know." And I was like, "Okay," which isn't true. They knew more than that, but that was the call. Was it's Cyclops and Wolverine? That's all we know. And so I was like, "Okay." So I'm not doing Uncanny. And then they called Ed right after me. I'm not doing X-Force. They called Ed right after me, and they were like, "Hey, you're taking X-Force." And so it was funny because we were all doing musical chairs for it, but John's pitch like definitely informed it, and like I talked to him a bunch about what he was doing and what I was thinking about doing. And he was very gracious and very great, and John's a good buddy, and someone he's one of my favorite writers in comics, always has been. And he was like, "I don't want you to turn your story in any way to reflect me. Like, I don't need that. Like, I've built a thing that could appear at any point, so you don't have to build a path for me." And I was like, yeah, I get that. And I was like, "But I would like to, if I'm doing this sort of end of an era stuff, I'd like to know." And so I sort of worked with him a little bit. I sort of worked off of his stuff a little bit, because he was already in progress. I mean, I think he'd written the first issue of House of X before we'd written our first issue of Uncanny.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm trying to remember when I saw it. I think it was before. Yeah. Because he was, I was supposed to be doing something with Pepe, and then Pepe was gone, and I was like, "Where'd Pepe go?" And they're like, "Oh."
Pepe, where are you?
Pepe, where are you? Pepe's the best.
Oh, he's so kind. He's been so kind to our Instagram page. He's always great at regramming and reaching out to people.
Oh yeah, he's
a nice guy. Very nice guy.
He's the sweetest.
And Hickman too, by the way. Everyone we've spoken to has just said great things about Hickman.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
Such an amazing human.
Yeah, he's truly he's great. He's one of those things, like he definitely, like Nightly News and his early Image stuff is like some of the stuff that got me really excited about comics in a big way when I was like thinking about trying to make comics. And so to like finally like meet him and be working with him and stuff was really, awesome that he turned out to be a really good guy.
So then I'm also, in addition to being a big Jean Grey fan, I am also a big Nick Gray fan.
Okay.
And you also brought him back into the fold. I mean, he was already back, but he was MIA for a little bit. Was Age of X-Men then, like once you found out the Hickman's team needed a little bit more time, where you guys like, okay, then let's do Age of X-Men to buy some more time, and that way you have the Wolverine Cyclops story, and then Age of X-Men running.
So what it was when they brought us in for the big summit for me and Kelly and Ed, I had this plan for what Astonishing would be. And what I wanted Astonishing to become, I knew that I was ending Astonishing to do Uncanny, but what I wanted it to become was the upcoming 2 arcs was going to be a Legion arc. I had a 3 arc plan. It was going to be a Legion arc, X-Man arc, and then a Legion versus X-Man arc. And it was, we were calling it Grandchildren of the Atom, because it was, the kids of the X-Men, and like sort of the idea that like the X-Men never looks in the eye the fact that like we inherently assume that like the people who are like, I hate the X-Men and I'm afraid of the X-Men are wrong, and because they're bigots and they're monsters. But there becomes a point where it's like even the X-Men have to be like, some of these things are really dangerous. And it's really interesting to me that Legion and X-Men could be those things, that like their own children are scaring the X-Men. What does it mean if like this is how the powers work, that it keeps becoming progressively more dangerous to the universe and stuff? And so that was my pitch, and they really liked it. And so when we went into the room, we were batting things around, and I said, I have this Grandchildren of the Atom thing that we haven't used, and everybody sort of perked up, and I was like, it's Nate versus Legion, and the X-Men have to sort of figure out who they back, because they're going to tear the world apart. And like they really, Kelly and Ed really liked that, and definitely ran with it and made it much better and added their own spin to it. But from there, we ended with a sort of, would be the death of Nate, and then the X-Men disappearing was always sort of the plan, because that was going to be John's coming on point, was them coming back. And then partway through, like I said, they were calling us to be like, we need more time, we need to move things around. And so when I got the next 12 or 15 issues of Uncanny, and Ed got my X-Force, Kelly was the one they sort of tasked with Age of X-Men.
Oh.
And they were like, Kelly, do you want to run this? And she started to do it, and then was just like, Kelly's a huge X-Men fan, like super passionate. And
I love her Mr. and Mrs. X.
Yeah.
So great. And I'm actually speaking to her at the end of September.
Oh, that's awesome. She's the best. She was like, yeah, I want to do, she had these plans, and then she's like, I don't think, like, the timeline was crazy, and she was launching a bunch of other stuff, and she was working on Captain Marvel, and she was like, I have to step off this, like, and she was really heartbroken, I think, to be like, I have to step away. But like, yeah, she just was like, I can't do this event the way it should be done. And like that, that's the credit to Kelly. Like, she is someone who doesn't want a thing going out with her name on it that she doesn't back 100%. And you can see it in her work always. And so Age of X-Men was a thing that she was not, and this was very quick, but she was just like, I had an idea. I don't think I can do it right. I want to step away. And so then it went to Zach and Lonnie, who were doing a bunch of X stuff, tertiary X stuff. And they were just super eager and had a great plan. And so they just ran with it. And so it was, yeah. So then we were sort of working concurrently, and I sort of, had to sit with Zach and Lonnie, and I was like, these are the X-Men I need for Uncanny. You guys can have everyone else. And they were like, okay. And so that was it. We set up the end of our Uncanny Disassembled to give Zach and Lonnie everyone they needed for their universe.
Yeah, Age of X-Men. I was a feminist minor in college, and the evidence, or excuse me, the inspiration of like Firestone's The Dialect of Sex and How Do You Solve Oppression was so evident in Age of X-Men that it was such a smart, cerebral read. But by contrast, if the X-Men were in this weird utopia, yours were like in the present, and it was so incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that was part of the design, was like, they leaned more utopian so that I could go darker, and I went darker so they could go more utopian, kind of. So when people are like, well, we want to see the X-Men winning stuff and doing well, I was like, that's what Marvelous X-Men is for. Like, this is not the X-Men winning. This is the X-Men in their darkest hour. Like,
Yeah. I mean, but you captured that so well. That is the point of the story. And you're obviously setting up the dawn of X.
yeah.
But I'm just curious, like, what was your mindset when you were writing Cyclops? Ed Brisson brought Cyclops back in the annual. So then you get him. And Cyclops is in a really curious position because he had just spent the last like 10 years trying to solve the extinction problem and bringing the mutants back. And now he dies and he comes back in a world that's completely destroyed. I mean, it's like he brought the mutants back just so they can have this low point. What was your approach to writing Cyclops?
You know, I love Cyclops. I think he is, you know, I know that he's a really weirdly divisive character for people. And to me, I think Cyclops is this great, you know, when I was a kid, my dad said to me once, his big complaint about superhero comics, he was like, you know, they're not stories. And I was like, of course they're stories. What does that mean? And he said, a story is the curtain goes up, you meet a character. When the curtain goes down, that character is changed. He's like, that's what a story is. And he was like, how is Peter Parker from when I was a kid different from Peter Parker now that you're a kid? And he's like, what, you know, has his life changed in some way? And I'm always like, well, you know, in little way, like, you know, he got married, but it got undone, and he got a job and he, you know, it got undone. And to me, Cyclops defies that. Cyclops was a kid. He was the good Boy Scout who sort of learned to not necessarily believe in the things he believed in. And then he became, you know, he ascended to Professor X's role and he became the leader, and heavy is the head that wears the crown. He then sort of started to see a different, you know, he sort of started to side more with Magneto, and he wasn't exactly, you know, who he thought he was. And then you have this amazing, like, Shakespeare by way of science fiction idea that his teenage self can come forward and see what he becomes, and like how amazingly horrific that can be, and like to see all the compromises he's made and all the horrors he's gone through. And then, you know, when Ed was talking about bringing him back, and we were talking about it, and, you know, we all planned it together, and like Ed was like, yeah, I think I want to merge all of them. Like, I don't want, you know, I don't want the X-Men who left to lose. You know, we were all everyone involved on X was like, when we send the kids back to their time, like, we don't want to lose those experiences. We don't want to lose those identities. We don't want to forget them. So there was a big thing about how to merge them. And Ed was like, I want kid Cyclops to be part of Cyclops who comes back to life. I want it to be through that and him to experience all these things. And that, to me, I was like, that's it. That's the key to writing Cyclops going forward, is that, like, he's had this tragic arc of being the Boy Scout to the leader to the person that he would think is a villain, and he has the perspective to see it. And what does he do when he comes out of that? And so he's a gentler leader than he was, but he's questioning, and that's exactly what he can't be doing, is that he has too much doubt, and he doesn't have his confidence anymore, exactly, and he's trying to find it, and he's not willing to make choices, and he's making wrong choices because he's split between these two people, that he's neither of them. And so that was sort of my idea, was just that, like, he's a leader going into an unwinnable battle, and he's a leader who doesn't have the confidence he did, and he's got a lot of self-doubt, and that was sort of where I was coming at him from. And yeah,
and it was evident, and you know, I love that you, Ed, and so many others during this time in the X office were respecting the stories that came before, and that you solved the dilemma of the O5. I don't obviously know what happened behind the scenes, but in story there was always like, oh, are they going to a pass? Is that a different pass? You know, and we were always worried, like, oh, what happens with the teen X-Men? How could it not impact, you know, the adult versions, and how are they going to solve that dilemma? And the way that Ed solved it with, I'm forgetting like the nuances of it, but like their memories are sealed within them and awaken at a certain point, you know, so they can just stop Ahab. But I really felt for Cyclops in that arc, but then I loved it when he reunited with Wolverine. I mean, you wrote them being reunited for the first time in a while because Wolverine had been dead.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was funny that actually that when I wrote that, I got a note from Marvel that was like, hey, you have a lot of, when I turned in the outline there, said you have a lot of fighting here. At the end, they're like, make sure you leave 3 or 4 pages for Scott and Logan to like catch up and hash it out. Give them the time and space. They have a lot to clear and get past. And I got the note and I was like, that's a good note. And then I sat down and I was like, no, that's not who these guys are. Like, that's not how it would work. And so like you get the page and it's just like they're there. Wolverine is there for him. They fight shoulder to shoulder. Then they give each other a nod and they're like, let's get to work. And that's it. Like, that's
It was perfect. Yeah, that was a perfect scene. They're not going to have this like, oh, hey, what's that? Like hug it out, or well, maybe now in the Crocodile Age they do, but at that point in continuity in history, no, they're not going to do that.
They're not going to do it. They both know that the clock is ticking and that there's work to be done and there's lives to save, and they're like, whatever's between us is between us, and it doesn't matter to the bigger picture, and we've got a mission. And so that's what I wrote, and I turned it in and held my breath because I was like, I specifically had a note being like, give this 3 or 4 pages, and I was like, I gave it 2 sentences. And they were like, nope, you nailed it, it's great. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, you did. You really did nail it. One of the other things from your run that sticks out to me was Blindfold's death. And sure. I'm curious, did you know from Hickman that precogs were going to be an issue in the Crocodile Age?
Yeah, that was a note. Like, we were looking, I sort of had a Blindfold idea that I wanted to use her and sort of have her basically telling them that they're all dead. That like, I wanted her just telling Scott, like, it's not going to work. This isn't going to work. Like, nothing you do works. And him defying that. And that's sort of being a through line of what it is, that like, none of this is ever going to work. Like, we don't win. And because she doesn't understand what's coming. She doesn't understand that, like, she can't see that it's not necessarily, the powers of 10. She can't see the Moira of it all, and that's
the Moira of it all.
So like, she can see the future, but she doesn't understand it, is basically was my idea. And then,
oh my God, that's the name of her memoir. I can see the future, but I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was great.
And then when I talked to John, he was like, yeah, they're a big problem for us. Like, I don't, he was like, I need to get them off the board. And he was like, and I don't know how to do it. And so I was like, well, I can take a couple off the board. And then we talked about it. And I think early on, I was like, if I'm killing all the psychics, like, people are going to really think that matters. I was like, I can kill one. I can't kill all of them. So I was like, I'll take Blindfold off the board and that'll be fine. So yeah, that was a sort of compromise with what was coming.
Okay. What about Wolfsbane? I know that death was pretty contentious among fans. Was there any particular lesson you took from that?
Sure. Yeah, of course. The Wolfsbane thing is really interesting because there's a few things. Like, there were a few things at play. Like, there were a lot of X-Men fans who were upset that the X-Men were dying, which I get. And I was like, well, that's the job. Like, they're going to be back. Like, and at a certain point, people were still yelling at me, and I was like, you can see solicitation covers for new books that they're on. Like, that they're not really dead. Like, come on, you don't get to yell at me about that.
Wait, is the internet being angry about something?
So some of the things I was like, okay, I get it. I get the outrage, and I love these characters too, and whatever. And then certain characters, everybody is someone's favorite character, so it becomes very. There are people where you hear from someone on Twitter where they're like, you shouldn't kill this person, and you're like, okay, thanks for the note. And then there's people where they're like, this character means so much to me and blah blah, and you take that differently. That has a lot of weight. Like, you don't want characters that people identify with and people really look up to. You just don't want to be taking those from people. And obviously there's not a finality to this. It's superhero comics, but still it's difficult. And so, like, I knew that going in, that it's a difficult job, and like, I was not here to like slaughter everybody's favorite characters from their childhood or whatever. The Wolfsbane thing became its own thing in a really complicated way because of some clumsy language on my end, which is interesting because I I mean, I don't want to get too much into the weeds about it, but like uh, the the line that people really got caught up on, people really identified, rightly so, as a sort of trans panic triggering line, as that's what it was. And it's actually a thing that was said to a friend of mine who was not trans, was a cis woman who was gay, and she was in a bar, and someone bought her a drink, and then like was hitting on her, and she, she said, like thank you, and she was being very nice, and there was a sort of confrontation when she came out to the person who bought her a drink, and he said, like this is a trap, like you're here, and like that. And I talked to my friend and was like, that always stuck with me. Like she had this really harrowing experience. And I was like, I talked to her and I was like, would you mind if I use that in this scene? Like, I think that's an interesting thing. So I was, I'm straight. And so I was in a way, I mean, not in a way, I was definitely borrowing some language that wasn't necessarily mine to use for the character, but then trans fans and allies of the trans community and identified it as a more trans-centric line, which just hadn't dawned on me because it was the time I'd heard it was used to a cis friend of mine who was assaulted by a real asshole. So like, I tried to take something that was evocative of an experience that wasn't mine, and it was used in another way, and then you tie it to Wolfsbane, who's a shapeshifter, and it becomes this layers of things, and it became this very complicated thing. And I said, people were really upset, and I said to Marvel, I said, I'd like to make a statement, and they said, we don't want you to, and I was like, okay. And I let it go for 2 days, and I was like, no, fuck that. Like, I'm gonna make a statement. Like, I said in my statement, like, I don't remember what I said exactly, but I was like, look, I'm really sorry for anyone who was hurt or offended by this, and it's never our intention to hurt people, and it's certainly not to punch down. Like, this is supposed to be an upsetting story, but it's not supposed to be a traumatic story for people, and it's not supposed to work that way. And in that way, it was a miscalculation and a mistake, and like, I have a lot of regret about that. That line. I don't have a lot of regret about the, people were like, oh, would you take out the scene? And I was like, no, I think the scene and all of that is good. And I think the idea behind it is good. And it's actually something that Wolfsbane has faced before. And it's something that is like built into the X-Men from Go, is like when they are outed as being mutants, it's a threat to them. And that's something that's faded from the book. And like Wolfsbane among all the X-Men is the most likely to not want to be. Like, she's among the top X-Men who view themselves as sort of cursed, like her religious nature. And so the idea that she would try and pretend to be human, and then it would come out the wrong way, and she would be in danger and hurt by that, it like cuts to the core of, I think, a lot of key X-Men ideas. And so like, I like the scene, and I like the issue that comes after the issue of it. Like, I think it's a really good issue, with a line that is really unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, that was basically it.
Isn't it incredible how these characters have taken on so many different metaphors and layers from the time when I started reading comics in the 90s, and the way it's evolved now. I'm just so proud of like the franchise and what it speaks to so many people.
Yeah, for sure. And it was so interesting because I was talking to someone about it, like someone who doesn't read comics, and they'd read something about it, and they were like, you killed a trans character? And I was like, no, she's not trans, she's a werewolf. And they were like, no, she is a trans character. And I was like, no, she's not, she's a cis character. You see her as a very, like, she's definitely is, I was like, she's heterosexual, she's a cis character. And someone's like, I don't think that's right. And I was like, it is right. That's weird that you would say that to me. I've read every comic she's ever been in. I know it's true. And I was like, but that doesn't matter for what we're talking about. Like, it's not about what's on the page. It's about how people relate to the character and how they identify with. And that's what I misplayed and misjudged. And like, not my understanding of the character. I was like, I didn't clumsily do something with a character not knowing their history. I fully knew their history. I did something with a character not understanding what they mean to certain people. And that's a big, and I was, and like, it was hard for my friend to understand because they were like, but they're not this thing. And I was like, that doesn't matter. Like to an audience they are, and that's the audience that got hurt. And like, that's not something I want to do. Like, and that's part of writing, you know, especially fiction in the 21st century and the Twitter age is like, you know, how much is author intent matter, and how much does, you know, the headcanon of the fans matter, and all these things matter, and you have to take into consideration. And like at the end of the day, like, you know, I had a lot of people be like, there's no way to like say this without sounding like defensive or self-congratulatory, and I don't mean it to be at all, because I regret writing that scene that way. But like, I had a ton of like dozens of trans fans reach out to me and say like how important the scene was to them. And like, you know, I had a young person be like, I gave that issue to my dad to read to help understand. And like, that doesn't undo the harm it did and the pain I caused to other people, but it is this thing that's very complicated to quantify, because I was like, well, it really worked for some people and it really didn't work for other people. And it's just this really complex thing. But I have to err on the side of like, well, I don't want to be hurting people who read the books. Like, that's never my intention. I donated my salary from that to Trans Lifeline afterwards. And
oh, that's wonderful.
I mean, it's whatever. You know, I just had a lot of regret about that line and the way it unfolded. But I also knew Wolfsbane was back in a month and a half. Well, but I've already read comics of Wolfsbane's in.
So, for as bleak as the X-Men were during your run, though, you know where I'm going with this. That scene where the Sentinel's attacking them and the Sentinel like gets destroyed, and it's Jean, and Cyclops is looking up and he's like, "You're back. Everyone's back. You're all back." And Jean just levitates through Wolverine and Emma and gives Cyclops the biggest kiss on the, what was it like writing? I want to say it was their first big reunion, but no, you wrote that, of course, in Resurrection. Yeah. What was it like having that moment though? Because I think the internet stopped.
Yeah, it was, I wrote 3 versions of it.
Oh, really? Well, you know, I'm going to ask for the other 2.
Yeah, there were 3 versions, and I was like, there's the version where Jean doesn't go to anyone. There's the version, I think I'm trying to go over it in my head. There's a version where like Scott rushes to Jean and Jean is like, no. That one is the darkest, because Jean reads his mind as he's rushing to her, and she sees all the mistakes he's just made and all the people who are dead, and she's like, what did you do? Like, you started a war, like you were in a war, and like you all these people killed. And so he rushes to her and she stops him. That one was so dark, I was like, I can't go there. And then there was one where he was like, I love you, but I'm with Emma, and that one just didn't feel right to me. I was like, no, I don't I don't think that's right.
Emma with her half-shaved head right there. Although it's funny with when it switched over to LaRocca, she had a little bit more full hair there. Yeah. And I always joked is because Emma saw Jean back and she psychically made it to look like she had more hair there because it's Emma.
Yeah. That's good.
My headcanon.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea that Emma, you know, in the story, Emma figures out a way to save her and Scott. That's what she's doing. She can't save everyone, and she's like, I can save. I mean, she sort of does figure out a way to save everyone, but they're not going to be. They're going back into the closet. They're not going to be public mutants, and she does it for Scott so that she and him can go and live in peace. And he doesn't want that. Like, he won't do that. And so the idea that he would then at the end be like, I'm with Emma, like, it doesn't make sense. Didn't make sense for the story we had. I had that, but I had to write the ending. I didn't have to write it early, but like, it was one where I wrote the ending really early on for the book. Like I was probably on my third issue when I was like writing the ending and just being like, this is where it'll go to these three things. Like, let's have a conversation and think about that and what should I be steering towards. And so the one, everyone sort of voted in the office on the Gene one, and I was sort of like, and I could have gone a different way, but I was like, no, I think the Gene is the right move. We'll deal with the ramifications later. And then I was like, oh no, we won't, because we'll be in House of X. We won't deal with it at all. It'll be sort of a clean slate on that. So yeah, I just wanted to give it that sort of moment of light in the darkness for those two, at least.
Well, it ended on a very, we get so many DMs here at Power of X-Men, like, oh, what should I read? Where were the X-Men before Hoxbox? Because Hoxbox was a big jumping on point for so many readers. I didn't even realize it until I started the Power of X-Men podcast, and specifically our Instagram page. People just DM me like, Hickman, what came before? So yeah. It's incredible. I have a question for you. You ended it on such a great springboard for Hickman. Was there ever any talks of you coming into the Hickman era? Can we expect to see you in the Hickman era?
No. Well, that's a two-part question. Yeah, when John started, he was like, "What do you want to do?" We were at a bar, hanging out, and he was like, hey, let's step outside and talk. And he was like, what do you want to do? Like, it's yours. What do you want? And I was like, no. Like, I said what I had to say, and this is your show. And I was not worried about upstaging John. I know that he's one of the biggest writers in comics, and I knew what he was doing would be whatever. But I was like, you should have a clean slate going in. You don't need me. Like, I don't get anything from you. Don't get anything from me being on the team. And like, I don't know. I just was like, I was very flattered and really appreciative. But he was like, anything you want is yours. And I said, no, it's fine. There was a time, we were actually about a year ago, I sort of talked to him about doing something that I can't say what it is, but we had a little bit of chat about something, and he was like, what would you do with this? And I sort of bounced off him, and he was really receptive, but yeah, it just didn't, I sort of said a lot of what I had to say with the X-Men, and like I could come back, but like coming back in a sort of, unless there are certain characters that I was like, I would really like to work with these characters that I didn't get a chance to really work with and do things that felt important to me with. And without that, like, I don't want to just come in and do, just a random team again, because I did a lot of stuff. So yeah, and my plate is pretty full right now anyway. So no, I don't think I'm going to be doing any X stuff anytime soon. They're in very good hands. Jerry and Vita and Teeny and Leah and Sai and who else? A lot of other people. A lot of people are doing awesome. I can't name them all, but I can if I think about it. But yeah, everyone's doing such awesome stuff, and like, I'm just happy to be. It's nice to be able to sit there and be a fan again, and just be like, this isn't my job. Like, I can just read this because I like reading it.
Well, you are missed. Wow. And thank you for your time today. I could ask you a zillion other questions about Gene and your Uncanny. We didn't even touch Astonishing, but that could be for another day. Matt, where can people at home connect with you?
Well, I have a Facebook page I don't ever use.
Same. Same. I forgot Facebook was a thing until today.
Yeah, it's difficult. I guess Twitter is probably the easiest place to find me. It's Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS. And I have one of those little Substack newsletters, but it's free. But I just talk about whatever. At some point, I'm going to start doing like a kind of deep dive on my newsletter about stuff I've written. Like, a lot of people hit me up and are like, can you talk about pitches on things? And a lot of X-Men fans are like, can you talk about your pitches on X-Men? And I'm like, yeah, like that sounds fun to me to like, I'm super self-conscious about it, but like to just sort of explain and like talk about, stuff and unused things and ideas and unused pages. And
I mean, that Phoenix Resurrection unused pages, it's my mission now.
I think I must still have this. But yeah, so I have a newsletter. It's like MatthewRosenberg.substack or something. I don't know. It's all, you can find it on my Twitter easily. So Ashcan Press on Twitter is probably the easiest place.
And any projects coming out that you want to plug?
Yeah. I have a new creator-owned book coming out through Image in November called What's the Furthest Place from Here? It's me and my buddy Tyler Boss. We did a book called Four Kids Walk Into a Bank together. This is our new, it's sort of a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age story about gangs of children wandering the wastelands of America after the end of the world.
Big sold there.
It's weird. It's a real weird book, but that comes out in November, and I'm pretty excited about it. And other than that, all my work is across the aisle at DC right now. So I'm doing a bunch of stuff in Batman-related stuff in Detective Comics, and I have a new book called Task Force Z with the Red Hood coming out in November. And me and James Tynion are co-writing a book called DC versus Vampires. I don't know how much of this is interesting to X-Men fans, but if you like the X-Men and Batman, which there is an existing Venn diagram, that's where you can find it.
It's safe to say that there are some overlaps. I'm a big Batman stan. Look what I just got in. Boom.
Oh, so good.
Oh, I love Sean Murphy's art so much.
Sure. Yeah.
Love Sean Murphy.
All right, Matt. Heavy? That looks heavy. Is it heavy?
No, it's not too heavy.
Wow.
I'm just really weak. It's funny. I went to the chiropractor the other day, and he's here like, I can't tell if you're just really weak or lazy. Because he was testing my reflex. I'm like, oh. So no, it's pretty light. But Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And folks, as always, I'm the Uncanny Dayspring signing off.